welcome to Raconteurs News.
Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. This Tuesday evening, it's all dark, it's getting very, very wintry. I don't know, we might even have the first frost of the winter this Tuesday night. So, a bit strange we've got to the end of October, well, 1st of November, and we haven't even had a frost this year, which I think is slightly strange. But anyway, good evening, Jason. How you doing, mate?
Good evening, Andy. I'm all right. I've had a bit of a shitty weekend. I've felt like dog shit all weekend. Excuse my French. That's the last time I'll do it, Tony, honestly. I've got this ear infection I just can't seem to shake off, and it keeps coming back and giving me loads and loads of pain. And yesterday I wouldn't have been able to do this, day before either. So I'm feeling okay. I've got some stuff to spray in my ears. Mm-hmm. Antibiotics, and we'll see how we get along. But I'm feeling a lot better now. It's from this morning. Oh, well, that's good news, mate. Yeah, I was a bit concerned about you. You did seem in a bit of a rough way over the weekend, but been an interesting day today. Unfortunately, our guest who we've got billed on the schedule tonight, Andy Mackey, Andy seemed to have disappeared off the radar the last few days, so if anybody's listening who's in touch with Andy, get him to give us a call. I'd just like to know that he's safe and sound, because I know he's got a lot going on at the minute. But we've been pulled out of the shit at the last minute by one of what's normally our backroom boys, but Jack's decided he's going to come on and have a chat to us tonight. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, lads.
Always good to have a talk.
I think the gloves are off now. I'm now officially with Autonomous Media. I don't know if we want to mention that, but you know what I mean. I'm not broadcasting as yet, but Freeman Jack is back.
Freeman, that's got to be your tagline, isn't it, for the near future?
It has been used several times before, actually.
Freeman Jack is back, sack and crack. And all ready for his new radio show.
All ready for me pajazzle.
Oh dear. Yeah, well, yeah. You mentioned Autonomous Media there, and that's probably a name our listeners aren't familiar with. But going forward in the next couple of weeks, that will be the new banner that we'll all be sailing our ships under. So. We'll be moving to a new website very shortly.
Well, Raconteurs will be essentially unaltered, except for a slight adjustment to the way that the various streams will be being served.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, basically, we're just going to end up being able to provide a better service and something which is a bit more seamless, because although Spreaker's served us well for this past year, has got its limitations, and I know a lot of people get frustrated with having to refresh the page to get the player to go sometimes, and you know it's done its job, but we've got something bigger and better, and thanks to you, Tony, Nick, Jimmy, and all the guys working in the background, we'll be moving over in the next few days, hopefully. But don't worry about that. All the details will be on the RN website, and also I'll plaster it all over Facebook and Twitter and whatever else I can get connected to, and let everyone know.
The site needs populating yet, doesn't it? It's just a bare template at the moment, so needs a lot of work yet before we can really sort of go live with it properly. But just a little introduction to it, just so that people don't get concerned that this is some alternate setting up. This is an additional rather than an alternate, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, here we go. We've got a question about the new site already in the chat room from Mithrin. He wants to know: will we be able to post our pictures on the new site? I'm presuming he means in the chat room there, but there is a facility in the Boom chat room on RN at the minute where you can post pictures, but it doesn't seem to work for Mithrin. So, but
okay.
I don't know. Do you know any more about the chat room?
We are looking into which variety of chat we're going to use, and I think the current sort of conclusion is that the Boom chat is working very nicely, generally speaking. So it will be a matter of how easily that can be integrated into the new sites, multiple.
Yeah, I think
Essentially, just to explain, the new autonomous media will be an umbrella site for not only Raconteurs news, but all of us new hosts coming to the sort of forum.
Mm-hmm.
And the intention is that all of the directly affiliated sites like my own, and one would hope in the future the likes of the Docs and Unique Lees, etc., and that each of those sites will all individually and jointly carry the autonomous media chat, which will become the RN chat, and the autonomous media group player, which will be the effective Raconteurs news player as was. Only in addition to this, you'll also be able to find on that player several other stations, all of whom streams will be readily available should there be nothing going out on Raconteurs.
Yeah, I was looking at it the other day. I like that feature. And who's on there at the minute? We've got Deprogrammed Radio, Wolf Spirit Radio.
And they load instantly. You click on them and they start playing. There's not even any delay or anything. I'm really impressed with the slickness of it and how quick it was to set up.
Well, that's possibly down to...
So that's radio station. That's backroom news from the backroom boy. Yeah, this basically it is. My studio space here has been long overdue and is still some months off. I was going to build a studio in the back garden, but one of the lads is now moving out, so there's now a room become available free in the house, or will be in the next month or two. So what I'm probably going to do is move into that box room, or not move into that box room, but adopt that box room as the new studio. And once I have, I'll then be returning to broadcasting, hopefully with an entirely more professional show than I was ever able to muster before because of all the disturbances and interruptions.
Oh, that'd be good. Oh, so you'd be like me, you'll be banished to the spare room then, Jack?
Something like that, yeah.
And me as well. My daughter moving out and not needing a room anymore helped immensely.
Yeah, that's it. We're the kings of the spare rooms. So, what's been on your radar lately then, Jack?
The last couple of months, I've been obsessively pursuing the hacker sort of culture, should we say, subculture, I suppose would be a more appropriate one.
Are we talking about hackers as in computer, or hackers in New Zealand dance?
Everybody sort of thinks of them as being computer hackers and being entirely associated with code. But in fact, the specifics of hacking are based on the original profession of pen testing. This is penetration testing, which is essentially the occupation of being a security analyst who is paid to try and break into people's hardware or onto their sites.
Mm-hmm.
Out of this came the sort of slightly more nefarious sort of tradition of hacking that we've become more familiar with, the sort of hacktivism of the likes of Anon and WikiLeaks. You've also got the likes of LulzSec. I was actually really, really surprised. I had absolutely no idea how successful bloody LulzSec had been. I had a few inklings of what they've been up to. LulzSec is essentially a fringe branch of Anonymous, and they're the ones that literally just go around defacing websites for the fun of it. But they don't just go around defacing any website. They go around defacing things like the CIA homepage. Yeah. One of their members, I think, was serving a 105-year sentence for one of his campaigns. Certainly well worth a YouTube of Hacker Wars. Real eye-opener.
Oh,
but
cool.
One of the specific reasons why I've been pursuing the sort of hacker... the sort of hacker collective over the last couple of months is I began to see sort of lots of lines of narrative that could be drawn between what had occurred in the sort of 20 years plus of hacking and what had occurred to the likes of the Black Panthers, to some degree us, the Travellers, the Greenham Common ladies. Basically, it was a study of infiltration. Right. But unlike all of the previous efforts of infiltration, subversion, and overthrow that have been so successful in the past, it doesn't seem to be sticking with the hackers. I mean, first of all, the whole sort of LulzSec and anonymous arrests appeared to have had a pretty big backlash. And certainly there was an awful lot more sort of front door hacks being taken on fairly large mainframes, basically as a retribution for the perceived. You noisy gits, I'm on air. Sorry, man, listen, I just thought.
Actually, Jack is broadcasting live from his local McDonald's as we speak.
No, just got the lads working next door.
Yeah, watch out for scary clowns.
Fuck scary clowns. Anyway, so the long and the short of it is that the sort of hacktivist movement appears to have come under the same sort of efforts of infiltration, subversion, and overthrow that all of these other movements have undergone, only it appears to have not only sustained sort of 10 years or more of fairly severe and continuous attack, but they seem to have more or less pretty much shrugged it off as a community and moved on. I mean, there's certainly a degree of hackers being hired by the agencies that they're cracking, or at least that used to be the case. It's not so much now. Certainly the likes of the FBI and that, if they catch a really good cracker or hacker, then they tend to employ them, if at all possible. And there have been some fairly high...
It seems to be standard procedure that if anybody's committing a criminal offence, then hire them, get them on the team. Yeah, well, certainly if they're effective at it anyway. But there's a whole other side to hacking that I was previously unaware of. And in this sort of tradition of penetration testing, you have the traditional kind of sort of code jockey sitting at his keyboard, trying to hack in through the wires. But what I didn't realise is that there's a whole element of things like social engineering that come into this, and there are some seriously fascinating talks by penetration testers who never even go near a computer. There's a great one by Chris. I'm sorry, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's something like steal everything. Was it steal everything, break everything, kill everybody? I think will get you the video, but essentially it's him. It's not quite as serious as it sounds. He's actually paid to break into banks by the banks, and the things that he can do from just a position of projected authority, and with a few sort of fairly badly crafted bits of paper that look kind of authoritative and an air of authority, to the extent that he managed to break into this South African branch of a bank so successfully and so completely that he was essentially in there for sort of 3 or 4 hours, sat next to piles of sort of $100,000 piles of bills on the counter. He was even walking around with one of their computers in his arms for a while, wondering or not whether to just walk out of the building, when finally the manager noticed him and realised that he didn't know who he was, but had seen him coming out of the deputy manager's office,
called him over to his office, at which point he obviously thought that the game was up, only for the manager to simply ask what he was doing and him to point out that he was from head office and that he was the computer guy. Subsequently, this bank manager is telling him about all the computer problems. Oh, can you fix this? My computer's not, my PC, my desktop's not quite... Oh, while you're here, the printer's not working. And as part of his cover, he's basically told this bank manager that it's okay, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but the headquarters are going to refit your entire office. You've got all new computers coming, you've got all new printers coming, all of your worries are over. Now, what this guy does is he then walk, if he manages to get out without being caught, he'll walk out, he'll wait 3 minutes, and then he'll come back in, and he tells all of the people that he's basically just completely conned, who he is, what he's doing there, how he conned them, and how not to do it again. Well, while he's doing this to this entire branch of bank staff, the bank manager's hand has kind of gone timidly in the air, sort of halfway through. He's gone, does this mean that I'm not going to be getting my computers or my printer? And literally the level of people's gullibility in the face of a fake authoritative figure with enough of a cover story is really illustrating, and these just have made fascinating watching for me. I'm learning so much from him. It's great.
So essentially, this guy, he tells them what he's up to, but all they're actually concerned about is the fact they're not going to get a new shiny thing in the next week.
Yeah. Yeah, he's basically just broken into their bank, owned their entire computer system, had opportunity to walk out with large amounts of cash, certainly had large parts of their hardware in his arms with nobody questioning him, wandering around the building, could quite happily have walked out the door with it. Is allowed to mess around the backs of computers. Funnily enough, our local, we had one of the biggest social engineering hacks like that happen to one of our local banks. And it was exactly that particular type of hack, and they actually went to the same branch on three different occasions. On the first occasion, they installed the backdoor device that was going to then connect to the sort of Trojan router. They then had to go back in a second time to fit the Trojan router because that had to be fitted into a different room. They then had to go back in a third time to connect the two of them together and to connect them to the system. And I think they'd got about 9 million out before they were caught.
Bloody hell. Oh, did you see Doc Rocks posted in the chat room there that people in fluorescent jackets are nicking cash machines and large plant using similar methods, apparently. So it's quite widespread then.
I mean, this particular guy says that he was caught in a what they call in America a dumpster, a skip, by armed police in Texas, and was like sort of instructed to get out of the skip and demanding to know what he was doing around the back of the bank in the skip. And he had the blueprints of the bank in his hand. When he came out of the skip, they just had some building work done, and the builders had just thrown the blueprints in the skip.
Jesus!
So he's got blueprints of the bank in his hand, and he was like, I'm not armed. I've got a piece of paper of authority in my back pocket," and gently pulls out the piece of paper, telling them that this is what he's supposed to be doing, and it's all authorised by the bank. And the policeman accepts this and hands it back to him. And it's after that event. From that event forward, he always took two pieces of paper of authority, the real legitimate one and a fake one, because the police never bothered to actually check any of the details on that letter of authority. So just because he had a letter saying, "I'm allowed to crawl into the bank dumpster," he was allowed to crawl into the bank dumpster, but nobody bothered to phone the phone number on there or to check any of the details or even walk into the bank and say, "Is this legit?"
So essentially, he could have had that.
It's basically psychology, isn't it? It's basic psychology. I mean,
it's social engineering is the specific term. Is what you're talking about there.
If you, what's his name? Is it Frank? Abagnale. he was a con man, same sort of thing. And what he did is he noticed that people were. He was in an airport and he noticed that people were depositing money into the bank, using one of those like a dispenser. And so you'd open the dispenser up, put your money in your takings, and close it. And all he did was place a box underneath saying, and then put a sign on the dispenser saying, "Out of order, please deposit the money in the box below." And that's how he started. I mean, the guy, there's a film called Catch Me If You Can that's based upon him, but he ended up working for FBI. But that just shows you how gullible people are and how people are easily tricked into believing that somebody's got authority over them.
I remember hearing about that story, Jason. It would be when I was in my teens, because I had a Saturday job. I used to work in a motorbike shop. And even as a 13 and 14-year-old, they used to leave me in charge of this motorbike shop when they went away racing at weekends. So I don't know if the system's still in place, but they used to have a thing called a night safe deposit scheme at banks there, where there was like this little hole in the wall and you had a key, and you just opened this slot, dropped your bag of money in, and it was there safe when you went back into the bank on Monday morning. But I actually went to the bank one day and there was a notice sellotape to the night safe saying, "Put your money in this box, we'll collect it every half hour." And there was actually 3 leather bags in this bloody wooden... It was a handmade wooden box. Didn't look anything official at all. People had actually put their takings in this box.
Yeah, and people will say as well that these days people are more and more savvy and more cynical about things, but they're not. They're just as... In fact, I think it's easier to trick people these days than at any time. You don't even really need to do any... You don't need any skills. You just need to have... Like you say, Jack, you have that confidence. If you exude that confidence and that comes from you, people are timid. They'll back down and they'll just do what you said just simply because... That
particular chap has got another strategy that he does where he carries in a pair of sort of Buzz Lightyear pyjama bottoms that are 2 sizes too small and a sort of Donald Duck t-shirt. Gets into somewhere reasonably low security on a particular high security building, changes into this sort of bizarre outfit, and then just wanders around the building looking like he's completely insane. And he says the number of times that he's placed into secure lifts with access to secure areas simply because he appears to be some lunatic that's wandered in lost and wants to get back to the lobby, and nobody bothers to actually accompany him.
Wow. It's quite amazing.
It's just, this is the sort of social engineering side of it. Some of the other sort of slightly more interesting, perhaps geopolitically, is that one chap actually hired, I suppose you could consider him a failed mercenary because he'd actually done time for the, I'm going to say, Panama coup that failed in the sort of mid-80s.
Uh-huh.
Wasn't that the one that Mark Thatcher was involved in?
Yes, yes. And basically he's paid this mercenary to conduct all of the sort of standard mercenary tactics for doing an internet-based coup d'etat, and has essentially reverse engineered the modern coup d'etat. So all of these various sort of Arab Springs type events, he's reverse engineered them to work out how they were carried out, and a lot of them that we've been told are this mass uprising being generated by the huge amount of subversive activity on the internet. Some of those countries only have 6% internet.
Most of those are staged, aren't they? They're mostly to install puppet governments into these countries.
This is exactly it, and so we're now being given this smokescreen of the hacktivist revolution And from his analysis, it would appear that virtually every one of these so-called hacktivist revolutions has been nothing more than an American alphabet spaghetti agency busy doing their usual business of destabilising sovereign governments and overthrowing democratic leaders.
Do you think that genuine hacktivists, people that are in it for the right reasons, people that perhaps go under these umbrellas, anonymous and that, do you think that they can see the false ones and the fake ones? And is there a way to sort of weed out the rubbish from the good stuff?
I would suggest not always. I would suggest that hackers are probably just as gullible for a good story as anybody else, and there appears to be an intentional seeding of the sort of hacktivism community to misdirect, redirect, and to usurp energies. Certainly Occupy Wall Street now looks entirely like a constructed event.
Also, it's incredible to me how an organisation such as WikiLeaks, which is an infant organisation, really, in relative terms.
How many arrests have come from WikiLeaks?
But I'm just this is what I'm saying. It's incredible how much of an influence they are. We're told that they are having over this presidential election.
Mm.
Do you understand what I mean? It's such a really.
Like I say, with WikiLeaks, is all you have to do is look for the arrests. If the documents that they were exposing were as devastating and as groundbreaking and as what I mean.
This is what I'm trying to say. I mean, I'm not sat here bigging up WikiLeaks. All I'm doing is I'm just saying as a concept, the whole thing, the hacktivist thing. Can be taken by people that want to move it into a certain direction so they can get an organisation such as WikiLeaks that has had a huge influence on world events over the last few years, the way that we perceive them anyway. So if you can get somebody to dress that up as something that's hacktivist. Now, I just wondered whether people that were really into the hacking and were really doing it for good reasons, can they weed those out, and can they recognise who's real and who's not?
There's certainly an awful lot of that. If there's any community where the facts are going to be found, whether they're well hidden or not, it's most likely going to be the hacker community, because they're not reliant on the information that's in the public domain. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I would suggest that the chances are that Julian Assange's personal computer has been visited many a time by many an independent body, and not necessarily working for any sort of agency. And again, this is the sort of information that's been invaluable to me. There's a phenomenal DEF CON talk. I think it's called 4,000 Passwords. 400,000 Passwords. And it's a live cracking event where this guy is basically talking about the software that he's using, and while he's talking, the PowerPoint or the screen behind him is rolling lines of text as he's talking, and during the course of a half an hour presentation, his little laptop PC busily cracks 400,000 passwords with a sort of 95% success rate. And essentially this is anything under a 14-character password. So if you're 13 characters or less, you're crackable.
Oh, I'm pleased to say I mostly use 20-character ones now, Jack, with special characters.
Mm-hmm.
But does that just make me a more challenging target? I don't know.
No, essentially the way that it appears to work is that because of the time, effort, and CPU resources that are required for doing hard cracks, soft cracks are always going to be the primary approach of all of the various agencies of any nefarious efforts to get into your system.
Oh, so essentially, if you follow sensible steps, then you are more likely to be secure. There's no guarantee. Once you connect your computer to the internet, there are no guarantees, are there? Somebody wants to be in bad enough.
You can do a lot to improve your security. For a start, never ever use anything Microsoft. Easier said than done. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Mac OS X is certainly a far more invulnerable system than a Windows machine. Linux, as long as you have sufficiently passworded it and use good keychain discipline. Keychain in Linux is basically where all of your passwords are stored as an encrypted hash.
Okay.
So I can't remember how many digits long that is, but it's basically a bunch of gibberish numbers and letters that are generated as a combination of the password that you've entered and are wanting to store, and your username and password on that machine. So unless the cracker knows all three of those components, it's a virtually unscramblable string of numerical digits.
So what we should do is we should get people in the chat room. If people in the chat room would like to just type in their password and tell us what it's for, tell us what site it's for and username, and Jack will tell us what he thinks of these passwords, whether it's strong enough or not. So if anybody wants to do that, we can. You
can drop your credit card pins in as well. Certainly 1, 2, 3, 4 is quite a common one. So we'll double check that your credit card pins and your debit card pins aren't just like a silly number.
Yeah, I like using a phrase. I mean, a lot of my passwords on things that are not really important is like, maximum testicle circumference, that sort of thing. It's just something that's easy to remember, and also, it's going to be difficult for somebody to crack.
Yes. On a more serious note, once we finish trying to hack and crack everybody's Facebook accounts and credit card details,
a hackback.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the slightly more reassuring things is I've seen some fairly good efforts at reverse engineering. The NSA had an unintentional release of one of their sort of materials catalogues where all of their various devices that they could sort of apply for and buy were listed. All of these various Wi-Fi snoopers and sort of smartphone bugs and car trackers and all this sort of thing. Now, this wasn't quite that huge an issue because none of the specifics of the things were given, just what they were called, what they did, and how much they'd cost you to buy. But from this, there's been a fairly serious effort to reverse engineer just about everything that they've got. And the conclusion is they haven't really got a great deal more than is available to you and I, and that technology is nothing like as born identity as we're sort of given in the mainstream media. Certainly things like live facial recognition, the whole sort of CSI blag of, a grainy CCTV image and somebody walking across the frame with their sort of back towards you but the side of their face visible, and they're able to zoom in on the face and rotate the head and like sort of superimpose a face over it and run a bunch of analysis and get a percentage result of who that person most likely is and all of their file details. Not happening.
Okay, are you sure? I mean, I was watching an old episode of The Bill on Drama the other day, and they got this facial recognition technology back then. And that's what they were saying anyway. Do you think that's just propaganda?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. The truth of the matter is that the vast majority of all of the cameras that are engaged in the CCTV systems globally are A, very old, B, very poorly maintained, and C, very low resolution.
Oh, right.
Now, if they were to go around and replace them all with high resolution, high detail, well maintained cameras, the storage that they would need to keep any of those images for more than a few minutes would just be vast. Yeah, you know what a video file is like, what a raw video file is. If you shoot an hour of raw video, we'll now multiply that hour of raw video by 24 and now multiply that by 5,000 cameras.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge amount.
It'd be terabytes a day. You would need, multi-petabyte storage to even conceivably hold a month's worth of London-only data. I mean, it's inconceivable currently. So essentially, there is an engineering limitation to the practicality of the front end of the system, i.e., the actual CCTV heads themselves, the camera units. Uh-huh. Like I say, most of these are very low resolution. A lot of them are only black and white, and the very best publicly known details of one of the most expensive civic facial recognition systems that has been put in. I think it was put in at Dulles Airport. And despite the fact that this system had access to all of the biometric passport records, all of the photographs of all of the faces, now bearing in mind that when you buy an airplane ticket, even if it's a domestic one in America now, you have to present your passport or a photocopy of your passport to the travel company. They forward it to the airport. They've got a copy of it before you ever arrive at the building. This is all digitised and part of a data system. Well, essentially, with all of this, and even knowing who it was that was going to be arriving that day, what time they'd be arriving, and with all of this combining data, their system was only 60% effective.
Wow. Well, that does surprise me a little bit, because I remember a while back we had Pippa King on the show, and Pippa's done a great lot of work on the surveillance state, particularly with reference how it's been used in the schools and education system. And one of the things I remember her talking about last time she came on was a new device that was being installed mainly in retail shops, but particularly in petrol stations. And I believe it was an Amstrad device called AmScreen. And it scans your face as you approach the till. And by the till, there's a little screen and adverts appear with stuff that's directed at you. Now, I remember Pippa did say, I've got to question how effectively it might have been, because as I approached the till, she said, I've got an advert for Cheesy Puffs. Do I look like the sort of person who's going to buy Cheesy Puffs?
Well, exactly. What you've actually identified there is a system that will use the most basic of... You see, we have 3 layers of facial recognition here, what we refer to as a generic facial recognition. First of all, we have facial identification. And this is basically a computer needs to work out, is there a face in this picture? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Which isn't as straightforward as you would think. Yeah? One of the most advanced facial recognition packages will quite confidently be fooled by a balloon with some lines drawn on it.
Oh, brilliant. I've just had a private message from somebody who's listening, and they said they had some CCTV of the back of a robber's head, and an inspector asked me if I could pan round and see his face. Wanker.
Yeah, sounds about right. So, essentially, the best of these facial recognition systems, the best responses that they've got from them have all been under laboratory conditions, and when the meta-analysis has been made, it's actually been down to the agent or whatever that's been sitting at the terminal and highlighting particular hits as they go through because they recognise the face.
Ah.
Which is not the same thing. Anyway, just to go back to this, so we've got facial recognition. This is there a face in this image?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then we have the Christ. It's basically the face mapping. Yeah. So it's the assigning of specific coordinate points to all of the key features.
Yeah.
And then you've got the database cross-checking. So now you've got this sort of biometric map, this very much reduced representation of a face, and now you can do a statistical analysis on the likelihood of this face being any number of other faces in the database. But this is entirely dependent on the database, the size of the database, the quality of the database, how up to date it is, and whether or not it covers the population that you're trying to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really isn't. We're not into born identity, not even close. If you're a person of interest and they happen to have your biometric sort of face print or can possibly get it, then there is probably a number of high security cameras. If you drive around London, you will notice a lot of blue, thin sort of lampposts with a dome on the top, and you'll notice a lot of grey, kind of L-shaped tubular poles with little bits of perspex on them. And I have yet to be able to find out what either of these systems are. The blue denomination appears to be Ministry of Defence Police, because when I lived near Paddy Mayhew, the old Northern Ireland minister's gaff, that whole manor was just dotted with these little blue lampposts with the thing on the top, and were constantly patrolled by armed military police. So I suspect that those blue ones are military police. The grey ones I'm not at all sure about, but again, they look like another high-definition system, and they appear to be doing something on the road systems, because they're nearly always gantries over the roads.
Oh,
but there's
right.
nothing at all to do with the traffic system cameras, because they're all the standard CCTV exposed gimbal type units with a large box basically on a sort of a U-shaped frame and clearly motorised and visible from the road.
Mm-hmm. The blue ones on the thin poles that you mentioned, Jack, that sounds a little bit like something I've spotted that's on the side of the road and been there for, I would say, probably between 15 and 20 years. There's these thin blue posts, and they look like they've got some sort of camera-type devices on, usually 2 devices. But I've tried looking into what they are and what they're doing, and there seems to be a lot of conflicting information, but no real definitive answer as to what they are. Have you come across those?
I think they're used by like the AA and RAC to measure traffic build-up, weight of traffic. That's what I think they are.
I think that could be the grey ones. The grey L-shaped poles, certainly they they always seem to have as many lenses as there are lanes. So you could be entirely right there, Jason. The grey ones could be connected that with the blue ones. Like I say, the connection with the Patrick Mayhew, Northern Ireland minister, and also when what was called the Ring of Steel was put up around the City of London. Again, that was all very small compared with the sort of standard CCTV equipment, but lots of little, not quite so small as these, but certainly for their day, very small CCTV poles popped up all around that Ring of Steel and on a lot of the sort of major roads leading up to them.
wow.
And bearing in mind that was, in case you've forgotten, that was actually armed police roadblocks on every major road leading in and out of the City of London for a period of about 5 years. London drivers were driving through armed police roadblocks on a daily basis, going into and out of the major, the capital city of this bloody country.
Well,
we're not under martial law or anything.
Oh no, we're not occupied by the UN or anything like that, are we? I mean,
we got even better than that now. The British Transport Police are finding that traffic times are too much of a delay for their armed officers to make it from point to point in London. So they're now trying to get it so that they can have their MP5 machine gun carrying British Transport Police travelling on the London Underground in full arm. Can you imagine sitting in a London Underground bloody tube carriage with some psychopath with a machine gun? That's going to make you feel real safe in paramilitary black as well.
Yeah, done up like a dog's dinner, like he's on his way to a party last night.
Oh, they do the full paramilitary combat gear.
Well, it's like people are saying, "Oh, we got martial law coming. We'll have the army on the streets." Well, they don't bloody need it because they've militarised the police to such an extent. What use have they got for the army?
Oh, well, martial law coming. Excuse me. You're about 2016 years late, I think you'll find. And it was just reinforced in 1066 because everyone was kind of forgetting.
Well, that takes me on to something a bit off topic, but it's been all over everywhere you look the last couple of weeks. And to me, it's one of the most disturbing situations I've seen of late, and that is the Dakota Access Pipeline in North America. I mean, what I've seen happening there is beyond barbaric, isn't it? You've been watching it, Jack?
I'm really behind on any sort of news. You'll have to remind me of the significance of that.
Well, they're trying to build this pipeline to carry the fracked oil from the tar sands of Canada down into the good old US of A. And it's going through some Native American lands and a sacred burial ground. And the people have stood there to stand up and say, enough, we're not having this anymore, you're not coming through here. And they're basically pepper spraying people, firing baton rounds at them. They've got shotguns pointed at the crowd. They're tasering old men and old women. They're
setting dogs on them. They're setting dogs on them, aren't they?
Yeah.
And bear in mind that this pipeline is only due to go through this area because the people of the city that is close by that it was going to go through, they didn't want their water contaminating. It was going to contaminate their water, so they voted against it coming in through the town. It's been rerouted through Native American land. It's their land, and it's going to contaminate the water, something chronic. And for me, the most important part about that is that people are coming together. It's not been reported in this country, but I know plenty of people that know about it, and people are coming together, and it's people power, and there's even different Native American tribes that have been enemies for thousands of years that are coming together over this one issue, and I think it's about time. And kudos to everybody that's supporting them and everybody that's going along, because I know that there's lots and lots of people that are going along.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a serious current affairs issue, but I'm afraid my my following of all current affairs has pretty much stopped. Certainly, I used to watch incessantly virtually all of the news media outlets, thinking that somehow by kind of removing the various sort of national spins by watching sort of Russia Today and Sky News and Press TV and Al Jazeera and CNN. And it was pointed out to me that if you're in a position of going too hard and fast into a corner on a motorbike and there's a big fuck-off tree in your way, if you don't keep it on the tarmac, you don't look at the tree. You don't look at the tree.
Yeah.
You look at the tarmac, you try to find a dry piece.
Yeah.
You aim for that. Yeah. If you look at the tree, you hit the tree. And funnily enough, the same said in sort of whitewater rafting, that you don't look at the rocks.
Oh, right, I've not heard that, but yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I actually...
And so, and this kind of sort of fits in with my sort of holographic reality theory sort of projected reality, that the more we focus on the problems in the world, essentially the more our lives are drawn inexorably towards those problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that we should completely ignore them, but I think if our attentions are to be focused anywhere, we're far better off placing that focus of attention at all of the solutions, i.e. all the wins. So yes, I mean, it's entirely appropriate that things like that receive publicity and receive support, and that their successes should be lauded and shouted from the rafters. And it would also be a mistake that, should it be a hideous failure and for the whole thing to fall flat on its face, that nobody should talk about it at all and pretend that nothing bad ever happened.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's not an easy line to navigate. But I really have begun to appreciate that if
you can't navigate them all, can you? You can't, Jack. You can't navigate them all, can you?
No, and to a certain extent, you also have to recognise what's within your sphere of influence. And if something is entirely outside of your sphere of influence, then becoming upset, angry, or depressed about that thing happening, or even elated if something good happens, well, what the fuck? It's not in your sphere of influence. It doesn't affect you. Yeah, obviously a feel-good story is good, but why pursue such close examination of things that are outside of your sphere of influence, when for most people I would suggest that it's actually a distraction from attending to those things which are inside of their sphere of influence. Certainly for me, my obsessive pursuance of so many different news media outlets in some sort of vain effort to try and glean what the truth was, I now realise was largely a distraction and an excuse for me to do nothing in real life.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there, Jack, but it's been quite similar for me, because although I couldn't perhaps put it as eloquently as you did, I used to be like you. I used to watch loads of different news channels to try and filter out all the bullshit. And to be honest, I got to the stage where I would just had it on and it was just noise, and it was going in one ear and out the other, and I thought, this is pointless, because... I mean, a classic example is earlier this week, I got up one morning and there was loads of ladybirds at the window, and they were black ladybirds, and I thought, that's a bit unusual for the last week in October. And then we got more and more ladybirds, and now we've got loads of blue bottles as well. And I'm thinking, that is very unseasonal. So, sure enough, the next day... appears all over the Mirror, the Express, Sky News, whatever you want to listen to, that these ladybirds, they're killer ladybirds invading from Asia and Africa, and they bite humans, and they're all riddled with a clap. What could be better?
Well, when you started going on about blue bottles,
as far as I know, the black ladybirds with white spots, with yellow spots, are merely a seasonal expression of the native English ladybird. I could be mistaken there.
Oh, these were black with red spots, Jack.
The breeding, the proliferation of the specific spot and colour variety within the breeding population cycles.
Oh, right.
So
these were actually...
You'll only see the traditional redback with the black spots, but blackbacks with the yellow spots are equally natural English ladybirds, and depending on how many of them are in any given area, depends on how many offspring the next year come out, and it's a seasonal cycle that it cycles around depending on the conditions. And as far as ladybirds, you live in the Midlands, where I would imagine there's quite a prevalence still of orchards. And at this time of year, in fact, that specific time of year that you reported those would, of course, been apple harvest.
Oh, right. Well, actually...
all the ladybirds live in their thousands in the crooks of the branches.
Yeah.
If you go to an orchard and dig it, if you ever need ladybirds, which is quite handy for you, Andy, because you might want some ladybird larvae at some point in the near future.
Heard of that?
Indoors.
Yeah. But
then you go to your orchard, and in all the nooks in the branches where all the sort of leaf litter collects, if you rummage around in there, you'll usually find clusters of hundreds to thousands of ladybirds all nesting in there of all different colours.
Well, thanks for that, Jack. That's worth knowing. But strangely enough, where we are, there are no orchards for miles round. It is a big food growing area, but it's mainly vegetables and salad plants that grow in our area.
Okay, well, the same. You know what I mean, ladybirds are basically the lions and the tigers of the insect world.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the top predators. So if there's any sort of prey, if you've got soft salad crops, then you'll have green fly and white fly and all those sort of things. Well, that's like ladybird. You know what I mean? Fine cuisine. So.
Oh, they're dandy things to have. Yeah. Just
bloody hell! The larvae are incredible. The larvae are like bloody Predator. Out of the Predator and Alien movies. They're mean. You see a ladybird larva on a branch full of green fly, and it's carnage.
Right. I've never actually seen ladybird larvae. What do they look like then? They're just like little grubs.
Kind of segmented, sort of maggot, I suppose, like maggot-esque body, but with a sort of abdomen and head and arms at the front. A bit like a dragonfly larva, if you've ever seen one of those. Or a caddisfly larva.
Yeah.
And with a ridiculous mouth with loads and loads of parts, which is just like a conveyor belt for greenfly.
Oh.
So they basically just march up a branch and eat like 3 times their weight of greenfly every day.
Well, I've got to say, I'm loving where this particular conversation's going. Larva. Yeah. Hey. What I was going to say is when you were talking earlier on, Andy, and you mentioned that there were blue bottles as well, I thought it was going to end up being one of those stories where you said, and it turned out that the old lady next door was stuck to the mattress and had been there for like 6 months, and thank God it's like been got out of the way because I couldn't get past all milk bottles up front of the store step.
I actually had that years ago when I was a teenager. The next door neighbour died.
Have you seen Andy's block? I wouldn't be joking about that, Jason.
Yeah,
this is the Midlands we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, our block of flats is known locally as Little Lithuania, so it gives you a kind of clue of what it's like up here.
I'll tell you what, as it goes, there's a kind of source of potential material for this evening. Not been done for a while. You could have an Ask Freeman Jack in the chat there. I'm not even looking at the chat as usual. I'm talking. Can't do the two at once.
Okay, that's cool.
You should have an Ask Freeman Jack. So if there's anybody that's familiar with my material and there's anything that's particularly troubled them, or that they were like, Because this is the thing with a lot of my old shows where I used to get interrupted so really badly on almost every event. And because I was essentially constructing a monologue live off the top of my head, the chances of losing some of the primary points in the distractions, it was almost inevitable. And certainly listening back to almost every recording I've ever made, I'm like, Dole! Knowing that the crucial point that I needed to make on air just simply doesn't get across.
Well, that's a great idea to have an Ask Freeman Jack. There's a few things getting posted in the chat room, but how's about, we've just done an hour now, how's about we have a quick...
Starting to see a conspiracy been fooling me when I watch TV. They're manufactured views all over the news. It's giving me the blues, and it's time to choose. Starting to wake up from this sleep, from all the lies they spread that run so deep. But I will laze no more. Who are they fighting for? It isn't me. But now I see there is a new world order, but we're not invited. So much blood and murder from the drones unsighted. World War III is haunting me. I got to find a way to save my family. The human race has lost its way. We put our trust in science, but it's us who pay. Used to be civilized, but we've been compromised. We're on a one-way train. We've got to break this chain. Starting to see that we should be free. The powers that be want a piece of me. Should I do what they say or tell them go away? What is the price for freedom? 'Cause it sure ain't free. The time has come to raise the bar. There'll be nowhere to hide if there's a third world war. So let your voice be heard and let your heart decide to stand and fight for freedom while you've still got time. Wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up. Stand, stand up. Stand up, stand up. Wake up, wake up. The time has come to fight. Wake up, wake up. Don't waste another night. Stand up, stand up. What are you waiting for? Stand up, stand up. Oh, they're gonna soon be at your door.
I'm David Halpin. I'm a retired orthopedic and trauma surgeon living in Devon. And I'm only too pleased to discuss things with Jason and Andy at Raconteurs News.
Thank you for that, David. Welcome back to Raconteurs News. And we've got a comment in the chat room from Deja Vu, who'll be joining us with his own show very soon on Autonomous Media, our new umbrella media platform. And he's saying, great track, what's it called? It's actually called Wake Up, and it's by Jason's best mate, Heath Dwest. Thanks, Heath. And Jack's back, I believe. We've got a question for you already, Jack. We've got one from Mithrin, and he asks, could Jack review the similarities that he has noticed between the UFO witness reports he's heard?
Okay, yeah, interesting subject. I appear to have an almost entirely alternate view on the entire subject of UFOs and virtually every part of the phenomena, and just about anybody that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. In as much as my reason for arriving at the digital virtual holographic reality theory model of reality, which I've been working on for forget how many years now, certainly over 5, working with and in, and have yet to find any fundamental major issues with it. There are certainly some head twisters on it, but the reason why I arrived at that from my fundamentalist materialism that I began with was due to my experiences with epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things about the experiences of my experiences with my epilepsy were the qualitative differences between the world that I found myself in during the episodes during fits and what we would describe as ordinary reality.
Right.
And what I began to stumble across would be reports, would be UFO testimony, shall we call it, personal testimony of UFO type experiences that appeared to have these almost identical qualitative changes, differences from ordinary reality.
Oh, yes, I remember when we had Joe Summerscales and Bill Brooks on, and Bill was talking about his experiences. You said that a lot of his experiences were very similar to what you'd experienced during your epileptic episodes.
Yes, and this essentially led me to the conclusion, or at least the hypothesis, shall we put it, that the experiences that I've undergone through epilepsy, which have been utterly extraordinary and inexplicable, in much the same context as the sort of, people who have seen ghosts, people that have experienced, sort of demonic presences and things like this. How the experience was undeniable. I mean, trust me, a lot of them I tried to deny. I mean, some of them took me nearly 5 years to really kind of assimilate and go, yeah, okay, that was actually a real event. It just wasn't real in the normal sort of context, because there was information that I received in the experience that was just simply inconceivable to have gleaned from ordinary reality. There were facts that were corroborated independently, and actually usually not of my seeking. So it wasn't like I'd had the experience, realised the significance of certain parts of the experience, and then sought out corroboration. In fact, the most staggering one of these was where the current owner, the current vicar of the vicarage in the here and now, was the person who was the corroboree of the experience of having seen the old vicarage, which he knew to have burnt down, and he was actually able to offer in that exchange that, as far as he was aware, he was the only living person that knew of the appearance of the old vicarage, because he had an old watercolour of it in his loft, which he'd found when he'd moved into the new vicarage, which was next door to where the old one was.
Oh wow! So,
but I mean, that's historical. You know what I mean? If anybody wants to find out about that, they can go and refer to my work. In specific to this instance, what we have there is effectively something that to me became indisputable. Yeah, I still have questions about it, but the Occam's razor becomes on the side of it having happened and of there being some significance to it. Whether or not those significances are quite as important as I place them in my personal tier of hierarchies is questionable. But certainly something, to my mind, unquestionable happened. I came back from it with information that could be corroborated in the here and now, in the real world, which certainly appeared to have indicated that 1760s is where I've from the advent of the internet and being able to go back into the parish records. The pub that I saw as a pub then was last registered as a whatever it is. What do they call it? The landlord and landlady are like over the door.
Licensed premises?
That's the one. Was last registered in the parish records in like sort of 1768 or something. And certainly it didn't even occur to me that it wasn't a pub in the here and now. And I actually saw the people sitting in the pub, and they were period costume for that sort of time as well. So it would appear that I time travelled to 1760 something or other. So I'm definitely prepared to believe that other people are experiencing some alternate reality. Its similarities to my experience leads me to suspect that they may be experiencing some sort of near future event, possibly.
Right. Well, I regularly talk to quite a few people who've had these kind of experiences, and they always related to me as UFO stroke alien ET experiences. And a very common theme is people seem to get downloads of information that they couldn't possibly have got from anywhere else. And that does seem to tie into what you're getting there.
Right. Well, what appears to happen, okay, from my best, again, this is a best working hypothesis, and as yet I've yet to throw anything at it as a model that has seen it fail, so it's a working hypothesis at the moment. My best working hypothesis is that we as selves, say myself, is attached to here and now, this direct sort of, what should we call it, collective reality. And it appears to be connected by something a bit like the old VCR time codes. If you've ever seen the raw footage from a TV studio, you'll see the black bar on the screen with a bunch of digits that are all rolling. And this is essentially a time code lock. It's an electronic lock that was used within studios so that all of the machinery, this is pre-digital, so that all of the machinery, all of the cameras, all of the VTRs, all of the control room equipment and all of the monitors was all displaying this identical TCR. And this meant that when you then went into the edit suite to edit lots of different camera feeds down from their recorded tapes, is that you could just simply synchronise all of these VTRs and then just crossfade between the various decks to produce your final show. And the comparison here is that you can't actually see that time code. On a normal television programme, you don't see that TCR, that time code, which is hidden information within the video frame. It's actually off screen as a bit like the soundtrack on a movie, which would be a clear and dark bars just off to one side of the picture.
Oh yeah,
which is picked up by an optical sensor on the projector to then produce the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what we're talking about here is something that's outside of our normal perception. Yeah, this time code. But it appears to attach us to the here and now. And I think that it's associated with the ego self. That essentially the ego self is the self that we're aware of. When we say I am, we are referring to the ego self. And that this ego self, it's primarily concerned with remembering your name, remembering what day it is, remembering what time it is, remembering whether or not you ate breakfast. And it's very much connected with linear time and with placing events onto that linear time scale in order to maintain and to regulate normal sort of bodily functioning.
Oh, I get you, Jack.
Now, it would appear that in certain altered states, so under certain psychotropic drugs, in certain hypnotic states, in some states of shock, during things like epilepsy, heart attack, fits and seizures, during blood pressure swings due to various physical exertions. There is a number of different sort of physiological and psychological and environmental things that appear to be able to bring about the temporary displacement of this ego self. And it would appear that without the ego self keeping time for us, that we lose track of this TCR lock that keeps us now. And our experience, that part of ourselves that isn't I am, but is the sensory part of your sort of mind self, appears to not be aware that it's no longer in the here and now, because essentially the mind's desire to have this time code lock is so strong that it will search out any time code that's available, and it would appear that the sort of frames of time are very much like the grooves on a vinyl record, that you've only got to skip like a millimetre to the left and you've jumped a whole 30 seconds in time. And so I suspect that with the comparisons, with the similarities with a lot of UFO type events, I suspect that that's basically what's happening here, is that the experiencer has temporarily lost their direct attachment to the time code signal of the now that they were in before. And I think this also can possibly, it certainly can happen during the psychedelic experience, that it's possible to have shared time code loss.
Now that ties in with something I've actually been listening to earlier today, Jack. I don't know if you've heard him talking about it, but it fascinates me, and it's something I really want to dig into myself. And it was an interview that myself and Tom Barnes did with Tony soon after we first met him and came across him, when we were doing Enemy Within. And Tony came on to talk to us about flotation tank therapy, which he'd done a great deal of in the past and found to be incredibly beneficial. And
we've spoken about it at length.
Right. And I'd got a friend who actually contacted me today, and he was asking me about this float tank therapy. And I said, well, I've got an interview with Tony. I need to find it. And I actually went through about 30 different episodes of Enemy Within to find it for him. And one of the things that Tony was saying is, he said, through the use of float therapy and I think psychedelics, or maybe it was only one of those, but he said he thinks it could happen with both. He had the shared experience trip.
Yeah, and this essentially disproves, and it's not a common experience. I mean, I personally have experienced one complete dissolution of collective reality and a complete reconstruction of an alternate reality amongst a group where all of us entered the same alternate reality. And so there were 4 or 5 of us who left the room that we were sitting in and found ourselves sitting in a wood for several minutes before returning to the room that we were all sitting in to be able to discuss the bizarreness of the experience that we'd all just had.
Oh, wow.
And this completely, I mean, these sort of things, these sort of experiences completely dismantle any sort of concept of hallucinations being imaginary or visionary. You know what I mean? Just simply an expression of the imagination upon the outside world.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, the two pairs of people that I know to have essentially swapped ego selves and found themselves in their partner's body for the duration, 6 hours or whatever of the trip, both pairs refused to discuss it after they came down on their way home. Neither of them discussed it. Neither pairs of individuals had discussed it with anybody else, but all four of them independently all spoke to me about their experiences. And so I was in this really peculiar position of having heard four independent testimonies of two experiences, both identical, both where the ego self had swapped bodies and ended up in the opposite person's bodies, and both of them, the reason why they refused to talk to each other on the way home, and that it had been a little bit of a sullen, odd experience, was because the ego self in the other person's body was party to all of the other person's thoughts, desires, you know what I mean? And one of them reported that the other party had designs on their girlfriend, and he was party to all of their fantasies about what they were going to do to their girlfriend when they got hold of them.
Oh yeah, that must be a bit freaky. That, I mean, I've only ever.
It's certainly going to stretch the boundaries of any close friendship, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was once in a strange position. It was when I was about 17. I had this girlfriend, and she used to go into weird sleep states. She would go to sleep, maybe when you sat down on a Sunday evening watching the telly or something like that, and she would go to sleep and her eyes would open and she'd start talking and you could have a conversation with her, but she was absolutely fast asleep. Most of what she talked about would be complete gibberish. I once gave her a glass of milk when she was asleep, and she drank it and told me how beautiful the pineapple juice tasted. But I did, strange enough, find out that if I asked her questions when she was in this strange sort of state in between sleep and waking, she always answered the questions, and she always answered truthfully.
It's actually known as the hypnagogic state.
Right. Well, that obviously when she started telling the truth,
it's exactly that. It's an unconscious waking state. So essentially, you have what appears to be a wakeful persona, but it's not attached to this world. It's still in the sleep state.
Right.
Very peculiar. I actually suffer from narcolepsy along with my epilepsy, and would often fall into sort of 36-hour sleeps where I would be in that sort of condition where, you know what I mean, my partner would wake me frequently to, you know what I mean, feed water into me and to make sure that I didn't need the toilet or whatever, and I would be conversant but have absolutely no recollection of any of it until I finally came out of the narcolepsy.
Far out.
And they would be some long journeys into the other realm as well. But anyway, I mean, so it's kind of back onto the subject of ufology. Another element of the subject that has recently come to me through my my kind of postulating of my electrometeorology hypothesis, which is that clouds and weather are an electrical effect. Not one that I'm that deeply into yet, but again, not found a great deal to dispute it just yet. And if my hypothesis of electrometeorology is true, then any high field event, so any basically high voltage event, in peculiar circumstances, of which there are going to be many, is likely to manifest itself as something that is going to be, during daylight hours, look remarkably metallic, usually spherical, possibly sort of toroidal, sort of M&M shape, the standard sort of saucer shape. And it's also likely to have exactly the colours that high voltage electricity is going to produce. And moreover, I stumbled upon somebody who had actually done some serious analysis on the footage of the sort of illuminated craft type sightings. And he had actually studied the colours according to their velocities. And he found that there was an almost direct colour for colour correlation between whether or not the object was stationary, moving slowly, or moving very quickly. And that this correlation of colours correlated precisely to the energy states of electric plasmas. So when it was stationary, it would be mostly pinks and reds and magentas. When it was moving slowly, it would be sort of oranges, and as it began to speed up into the blue, and then finally sort of incandescent white as it shot off out of sight. Well, that could mean that this device is a plasma energy-driven craft of some sort, or it could just be an indication that this is an intensely tightly wound electric field, and that what you're seeing is the colour of discharge according to whether or not its charge state is essentially stable and charge neutral, which means that this thing basically sort of hangs in the sky for a number of minutes, or whether it's entirely repulsed by its charge environment and is spat out of the sky, explaining the sort of velocities of several thousand miles an hour of things that show up as definitive objects on a radar scope. But certainly, I mean, I had one of my close friends, Cybernism, popped around recently and simply had to show me this UFO video where this UFO is being struck by lightning. And on closer analysis of what appeared to be a spherical object being struck by lightning, it was actually plain to me that this was cloud-to-cloud lightning. So this wasn't cloud to ground, this was cloud to cloud. And that there was a downpour going on over here, and then there's a gap with no downpour, and then there's a downpour going on over here under the other cloud. The lightning bolt goes between these two clouds, but it's like it hits a wall. You can see the lightning turns through 90 degrees and then turns through 90 degrees again before going across to the other cloud. And it's right in the crook of that first 90-degree turn that this ball object is seen. Now, that could be because the lightning's bounced off it, should we say. That it's the reflection, and that the lightning hit it and illuminated it and then bounced off. But to my mind, what I'm seeing there is an intensely high-powered lightning bolt moving from a high charge potential to the cloud next to it of a lower charge potential, and travelling through incredibly wet conductive air because it's a rain cloud and it's actively raining. Now it tries to go through the dry air between its rain cloud and the rain cloud next to it, and effectively hits a capacitant wall, an electrical wall, where now its charge isn't quite enough to get it to the other cloud. So basically it goes sideways. At this point, you've got like a winding up of these charge potentials. And essentially you see this thing appear on the camera long after the lightning bolt has disappeared off screen. And this thing is what appears to be a physical spherical object, sort of internally rotating. And the reason why I refer to this is because some people might be aware of Eric Dollard's work in high voltage electricity is often referred to as the modern Tesla. I personally think that he's a bit of a nutcase and take everything that he says with a pinch of salt. But one of his stories is of detonating old broadcast transmitter valves in his garage from his big Tesla coil that he'd built up. And these stories appear to be maintained. He doesn't change them every time he tells the story. It's always repeated the same way, which to me tells me it's testimony rather than invention. And he says that when he used to blow these valves up with incredible bursts of high voltage energy, that the glass would explode, the tungsten would evaporate, and that he would see strings of galaxies or galaxy-like formations hanging in midair where the valve and the element had been a few seconds before, and that they would hang there in midair for a few seconds before disappearing. Well, that's exactly what I saw on this lightning hitting the UFO scenario, and I've just spent today watching the latest Rich Planet program, where he's talking to somebody who witnessed had a UFO sighting in Wales, and they're describing this thing as a daytime sighting, and of having the colour of lead, of it being spherical, and of it being stationary in the sky and not giving off any light, and reflecting sunlight. Well, all of these things would be true of a kind of plasma-formed cloud that was plasma-confined and electrically constrained.
Wow. I've actually watched that same... It's the new episode of Rich Planet, and it only came out about midnight last night, and part 3 came out first, and I had to wait till I got up this morning to watch parts 1 and 2. But, yeah... I mean, that was a load of miners on the way to work on the colliery bus, wasn't it, that saw that?
Mm. Yeah. And again, this sort of memory loss and a lot of the sort of time dilation things that seem to be associated with these sort of sightings as well. Or high-energy electrical fields do that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. They're known to do that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, our brains are effectively electrical instruments and intensely finely tuned electrical instruments. And a large blast of high-energy electrical field will upset the activity of the brain and will alter your perception for the period of the interference and possibly leave you with periods that you can't remember, or where you've sort of travelled from point A to point B and don't remember the journey, or...
Yeah, well, actually, I've had a thought. I know Richard D. Hall quite well, who makes the Rich Planet series, and I'm pretty sure Richard, in his previous career, was an electrical engineer. So
very much so.
What I know of Richard, I'll be pretty sure he'd be interested in what you've got to say. So when we've got this podcast sorted out, I think I'll be sending it to Richard.
Please do. I've actually tried to get in touch with him several times, and I don't know whether it's the Freeman bit or whatever it was, but I've never had a reply as yet.
Well, Andy knows him. He's name-dropping a little bit there. Bragging that he knows Richard D. Hall. Well, I know Ben Emlyn-Jones, so stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, good old Ben.
I could start name dropping, but we'll be here for a while.
Oh yeah.
Ex presidents of America, lords and ladies, all sorts, chiefs of business.
Oh yeah. Well, we'd have to do name dropping. I mean, name dropping with Richard. Yeah, that's cool. And
yeah, Richard, only because I used to work in PR, so those are the sort of people that I used to have to deal with.
Company, I think, was the word you were looking for, Jack. Was it?
Yeah, company. Yeah, that was exactly the.
Yeah, Richard is a lovely guy, and it amazes me how he actually does his TV shows, and he stands up and talks in front of 300 people, because when you talk to him quietly, he seems a very, very shy guy, and he seems to be really struggling before he goes on and does his talk. I've got a lot of admiration
from him
for him
as well. It's really not something that he would choose to do, I don't think.
No, it seems to be a calling.
I've actually followed his work, and I've been really impressed because he definitely came from the paradigm that, you know what I mean, UFOs are real, aliens are real, they're here, they're abducting people, and he appears to be slowly adjusting his perspective to a far more realistic version.
Well, you say I don't like him. I'm suspicious of him simply because I don't think that anybody who's still got their hair, if they've still got their hair, you know, then they've done a deal with the devil to keep it.
It's a good job Jack ain't got his camera on.
Especially at the moment, I didn't have my usual summer haircut at the moment, so I'm full hippie.
Oh, right, okay, all right. Well, oh.
Yes, that's news for you, Jason, isn't it? That we're not all baldies on Raconteurs News.
I do feel a bit of the odd one out.
Well,
right, okay. So have we got any more questions? Have we got any more questions from the chat?
No.
And just on the last side of the alien abduction and the sort of close encounters type scenario. Yeah, all cover story for military operations.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. What do you think of the Mandela effect, Jack?
Label that one under flat Earth for me, please.
Okay, fair enough.
I've visited it, but it's essentially we have revisionism. So we have political and historical revisionism, which is currently being undertaken with which is a serious subject. That there appears to be an effort to rewrite certain key parts of historical and
cultural.
Yeah, historical and cultural importance. And so you're literally having to go back to sort of first pressings of publications in order to be able to actually find the real version of the written word that's referred to. You're also getting political revisionism, where you have the rewriting of historical events, not just the propagandizing spin of you know what I mean, the sort of PR brigade, but a complete rewriting of historical events in a completely different context of how they actually happened. And for me, that's a very serious subject. But the Mandela effect is just it's another flat earth. It's how gullible are you? We have a lot of gullibility tests being placed on us as the internet community at the moment, and I'm sorry to say that on many levels we're failing at almost every turn.
Oh yeah. Well, at the start of the last show, Jason brought a new one up that had come across his radar, and that was the Donald Trump is a time traveller one, which quite hilarious to hear it for a start. But I actually went and looked at it for a laugh after the show, and it was, the story is that there was this guy who appeared in about 2000 called John Titor, and he was claiming to be a time traveller from the year 2036, I think, come back to warn us about the future or whatever it was. And strangely enough, I then went on Facebook to see if there was an account for this John Titor, and he's on my bloody friends list. No shit there, Jason.
Oh, super.
Well, you see, this is the other thing, is that we're constantly confronted by these bizarre and extraordinary, what appear to be coincidences. And in the ordinary mechanistic reductionist view of reality, these things seem almost farcical to contemplate. But to my mind, these are like, you know, in The Matrix when the black cat walks past the doorway twice.
Mm-hmm.
These things are the glitch in the Matrix. Yeah, if you want to get to the core of what the Matrix is, it's the abnormal instances that you have to study, and you don't have to study them for their possible conclusions. So if you're looking at something like somebody seeing a ghost or somebody seeing a UFO, you don't have to worry about, what are the implications? Is this aliens? Is this a dead person walking among us? You just simply have to study the actual experience. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And in accumulating story after story after story, you begin to put together a different model of how reality is actually constructed. And then, having experienced so many very peculiar things myself, when I finally came across Susskind's holographic reality in the sort of realm of physics being spoken about sort of academically, that perked my interest, because I pursue all of those sort of avenues of sort of inquiry. And the fact that it was a bigwig like Susskind that was saying it perked my interest. And while I was looking into that, I think it was actually first my boy Charlie stumbled upon Tom Campbell's My Big Toe, toe being theory of everything, which is what Einstein spent most of his life working towards. And Campbell's work is a staggering work of complexity, which appears to address most of the sort of critical requirements of a working model for reality, and that this is a working model for reality that is essentially non-materialist. So in every element of consideration of the subject, you have to remove your constant desire to place material objects within this virtual framework. And that's probably one of the hardest things that I've had to undertake over the last 5 years, is to begin to reprogram myself in this holographic paradigm where reality is entirely plastic and is almost entirely at my disposal and at my whim almost to choose what parts of it I wish to experience. And that certainly my ability to assimilate this into my actual day-to-day living seems to be serving me very well at the moment. Certainly I'm far more happy than I've ever been, and more comfortable in my own skin than I've ever been for an awfully long time. And remarkably nice things keep happening to me, as long as I carry on being nice and not wanting. Don't be evil appears to be the golden rule, really. As long as what you're wanting is the best for everybody, and that you focus on that prize and act as if that is all that there is to be done, it appears that the universe kind of falls into line with you. Perhaps it's a matter of you falling into line with the universe, but
yeah, I think I need to learn how to harness that a bit better, Jack, because although I do seem to be having some very pleasant synchronicities since my life changed and my outlook on life changed, it didn't do any good when I took my car in for MOT the other day. It's going to cost a bloody fortune.
Oh, you'll have to talk to me about that off air, mate.
Yeah, all right.
It's a Ford Mondeo. It's a Ford Mondeo. How much of a fortune could it possibly cost? But anyway. Sorry, that's me taking the piss. It's not actually a Ford Mondeo.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Jason, you were going to say something.
Private joke made publicly. Excuse me.
Worries. Jason, you were going to come in there.
I forgot now.
Okay, well, I've
You've
got
ruined it. You've absolutely ruined what I was going to do. I forgot.
I've got a follow-up question from Mithrin, and it's on the Mandela effect. He said, Rodin's the thinker. His fist used to rest on his forehead. Now it's under his chin. That's not revisionism.
It's always been under his chin.
Oh, that's what I thought, but...
Yeah, no, sorry. No. Again, what Mithrin, much as I love you, mate, you're falling for this gullibility trap. Yeah? And you're not engaging your capacity for critical thought in anything like the measure that it needs to be to navigate the intentional internet meme. So what we have is some very clever agencies who are obviously either just simply doing meta-analyses of things like Twitter and Facebook, or slightly more nefarious undertakings from the likes of Google searches and more personal metadata. But certainly that's entirely unnecessary for something like this. And they're literally testing the public for how goddamn gullible and stupid they are.
Yeah,
and the problem is that the more that these things get discussed in the internet medium, this is like sharing fluffy kitten pictures. Yeah. You're making the internet stupid, and you're making all the people that use it stupid. Stop it at once. Stop using the clickbait. Don't follow it. Don't look at it. Don't think about it. Go look at something else. Recognise it for what it is.
A big distraction.
Yeah.
Well, I personally use it for entertainment. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's. It entertains me, and it makes me think, and I just think that's just because you do find yourself thinking to yourself.
Well, I mean, essentially, what these things are all relying on is the awareness that now a significant part of the population no longer believe what they are being told by the mainstream, and they have become dependent on the internet as their primary source of data on the outside world and what's going on in their lives. Okay? Mm-hmm. So if you're now reliant on the internet as your primary medium for which to transduce reality.
Okay, I'll tell you what I didn't get. I'll tell you what the one thing I didn't get from the internet at all was mirror, mirror on the wall. That is what I remember it as being, and now it's not that.
Yeah, now it's magic mirror on the wall. Yeah.
Now I didn't get that from off the internet. I got that from growing up in the 70s and growing up around all that sort of thing, and and whether that's right or wrong, it makes no difference to me because all I use it for is entertainment. It don't freak me out. I just use it for entertainment.
Well, when I first came across this Mandela effect thing, I thought, yeah, okay, let's take a look at it. And Mithrin called me one night on Skype, and we did an experiment. And we both went onto Google Trends, and you can search two terms and see which one's been trending when. And we searched mirror, mirror on the wall and magic mirror on the wall. And we told each other what results we got, and we got entirely opposite results. One was saying that magic mirror on the wall was most common, and the other one had only come into being the last couple of years, and the other one had got completely opposite results. So then we searched other phrases that were involved in this, and then after about 3 or 4 searches, suddenly we started getting the same results. And then when we put the original searches back in, we both got the same results rather than the completely opposite results. So whatever's going on there, it's not instantaneously learning what you're doing, but it learns very quickly that you're trying to catch it out.
Well, that looks alarmingly like the Google organisation is involved in the running of these memes. Anyway, just to explain why this is so important to me. I hate to dial the term Google back into this.
Yeah.
But there's a show of mine on my Omniversity channel. You can find it on YouTube just by Googling Googleplex. The First Synthetic Mind. And essentially it's my postulating that the hardware of the internet has become the synapses of the first ever artificial mind, artificial brain, and that this artificial brain is entirely reliant for its informational input from its synapses and its dendrites and its terminals into reality. And effectively, we are those nerve endings. We are like the nerves on the fingertips of the central nervous system of the internet. And the information that we are feeding back into this grid of the internet is effectively driving the body of the creature that we have created with our communications. Now, do we want to create a creature whose occupation is primarily with the transmission of dick pictures, fluffy kittens, and internet memes? Or is it one of freedom, activism, and political dissent in the face of tyranny and dictatorship? Choice is yours, people.
Well, can it be both?
It can be both, but which is it primarily at the moment?
Well, we know which it is primarily. It's obviously the former.
We are unconsciously feeding something that is growing organically. This is the thing, having studied the way that the internet came about, the key sequences in the evolution of this sort of global network. And what you see is the nefarious hand of the industrial military complex behind its conception and its kind of birth. But then very shortly after that, we have the creation of the HTML language and of the URL system by Tim Berners-Lee, and the application of that onto what was then DARPANET, which was the original internet. And it was apparently 6 years before the chiefs of staff at the Pentagon realised that their now open network had no facility for passwords or encryption, and that their network had been wide open for 6 years.
That's incredible. That's absolutely astounding.
Basically, what happened was that the ARPANET was the sort of Pentagon's own computer system. It was primarily 5 mainframes, and they were hardwired together. There were big bloody cables between the buildings. Yeah. And then Sputnik went up, and the Americans shat themselves, and they realised that the Pentagon just simply didn't have the facilities or the intellectual manpower to defeat the Russian head start in the space race. So they decided to, all of the sort of standard industrial military complex universities became embraced in what became DARPANET. And what this was the extension of the ARPANET, the hardwired mainframe system, over the telephone system to the university mainframe. So the likes of MIT, Stanford, Caltech, all of these sort of places, all of the sort of trusted military industrial complex feeder universities were all wired in over the telephone system to the ARPANET, and this was called DARPANET. Well, this was only possible if there was an intermediary machine language that was, because the ARPANET essentially was all specialised equipment running its own machine language, its own operating system machine code. When this was expanded out to the universities, most of the universities were running either Unix or some very basic DOS type machines, and that these simply couldn't speak the same language as the ARPANET PCs. So in comes Berners-Lee with his HTML, this universal computer code that was able to basically translate over the network the instructions from one machine so that they could be understood by another machine. And then in addition to this, we have the URL, the repository of IP addresses of open internet portals or open network portals, which then became the World Wide Web as we know it. In fact, the www dot is the very thing that we think of when we think of a URL and think of HTML.
All them W's. Well, I think we've got just about to end the show, aren't we, Andy?
Yeah, that's it. We're coming to the end of the show. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Jack, particularly at such short notice. I know we're all
Jack.
You're very welcome, lads. Anytime.
I know we're all looking forward to getting you back on the air.
I'm actually really keyed up about it. I'm one of those that if I know that I've got something that I want to do, the sort of longer I put it off, I become more like a coiled spring. And I currently feel like I'm going to launch myself upon the ears of the world again very, very shortly.
There you go, world, you have been warned. Freeman Jack's coming back.
You have been
but maybe, just in the interests of Richard D. Hall, maybe we should lose the Freeman tag.
It's not happening. Carried it with me for 25 years. I ain't dropping it now.
Yeah, that's fair enough. We've not got anything definite firmed up for the next couple of weeks. I know we've got several guests that we're waiting for replies from. And there's some pretty top guests in that group, so hopefully we'll have something pretty special. I know we have got one really special show lined up for the 22nd of November, as that will be the 63rd anniversary of the shooting of a certain well-known American president. We will have the blind JFK researcher.
And the driver did it.
Do what, Jack?
Sorry. It was the driver did it.
Well, you're more than welcome to come on and join Chuck O'Celli, the blind JFK researcher. He's been looking into it for decades now, and I know it's a very personal thing for him, so really looking forward to that. And Jason and I will be guests on Chuck O'Celli's show on American Freedom Radio, and that will be going out live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com between 1 and 3 a.m. on Monday night, Tuesday morning. So you have to keep your wits about you till a bit later than normal there, Jason.
I've got a personal connection with the JFK assassinations. I think I was actually conceived on the night of the JFK assassinations, hence the name.
Oh, wow.
My dad was very insistent.
That's pretty special, that is, Jack. Yeah.
It's also the same day that Aldous Huxley died.
Really? Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a bit of a strange one, wasn't he? But that's perhaps for another show. But
yeah.
anyway, thanks so much, Jack, for tonight. Thanks, Jason. You've been brilliant as always. And thanks to everyone for listening, because without you guys, we'd be just three idiots on Skype talking to ourselves. So thanks very much for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday. We've got Doc Rock coming up on Thursday. We've got Keno's music show on Friday night. We've got Mark Windows on the World, 8 o'clock Sunday. And we've got Unique Lee back on Monday at 8 till 11. So we've got quite a lineup for you. We've got Jack coming on board soon. Hopefully Jimmy
I still need more suggestions as to what day you want me on, whether you want me on Fridays or Saturdays or whenever you want me.
We've got a schedule there, Jack, with loads of holes in it. Pick one.
Well, no, I'm trying to get... you know what I mean? I'm free, so it's when people want to listen.